So, as any of my viewers that have not yet started existing would know, what I'm doing here is essentially I'm trying to jump into the position of a legislative analyst as unorthodoxly as possible. Usually, you have to get a degree and know what the bills are, but you're going to watch the learning process happen if you're interested. I also might grab the beanie and do a little pool watch today because I know this shit gets boring. So, we're going to start with House bills, and we're going to go ahead all the way down. There's something like 2,000 of these bills to go through, and I'm just so excited about it. Ugh. So excited. But we're going to go through, talk about what they mean, what they do, whether or not they've passed, whether they're pending, what committee they're in, so on and so forth. So, we're going to start with HB 2002. So, if you go here, I'm going to take chat off for a second. It's hard to see. So, it shows all the codes that have been affected, all the sections we're at, and it says it was to the House Education Committee, and it looks like it passed. It was introduced to the House, and it's filed for introduction probably to the Senate, is what I'm assuming this process means. Filed for introduction to the Senate. So it's still pending, and I guess the lead sponsor was Higginbottom. So we're going to go ahead and we should be able to just look at the bill. Yeah, there we go. HTML. So here it is. So again, it shows you all of the sponsors, the people that sponsored it. You're only allowed, I think it was 15 people in the House out of 100. Only 15 are allowed to be sponsors, even if people like it, you know. So, a bill to amend the Code of West Virginia 1931, which is where a lot of these bills are coming from, is the 30s, by adding thereto a new article designated Section 1831 1, Section 1831 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, all relating to enacting an educational savings account program, providing a short title and definitions, providing basic elements of an educational saving account, application requirements, responsibilities of the treasurer, establishing a parent review committee, providing eligibility requirements for and rights of education service providers, including responsibilities of resident school districts, and addressing legal proceedings. Be it enacted by the legislature of West Virginia. So the bill's not super ridiculously long, but it still doesn't look super great. This looks like it's going to take a while. Sorry, guys. So, Article 31. This is fine and original. Article 31-1, right? So they're adding to it. This article shall be known as the Education Savings Act or the ESA Act. So we'll call it the ESA for the rest of the time instead of saying Education Savings Account. So, the following words have the meanings ascribed to them unless context clearly indicates a different meaning. Account, or ESA, means the savings account awarded to the pursuant to the article, to which funds are allocated by the treasurer or to the parent or parents of an ESA student in order to pay qualifying education expenses to educate the student pursuant to the requirements and conditions of this article. Treasurer is the West Virginia State Treasurer's Office. Curriculum means the complete course study. We know what curriculum means. Education service provider means a education service provider, like internet service provider. We have an ESP now. ESP. Oh God. Oh man. All right, I can't do this. Education service provider means a person or organization that receives payments from education savings account to provide educational goods and services to ESA students. Doesn't that seem a little vague? Because it means any person or organization that receives payments from that account. I'm hoping they're putting restrictions on who you can give it to, because this means that, like, crackhead Jimmy down the street could, in theory, be considered an education service provider. So let's wait, but that's a little vague. Um, Eligible student means an exceptional child other than gifted, as described in section 1820-1 of this code. Now, we could look through that. We can just click here. But this one's already long enough, so we're going to just move forward. ESA student means a student who receives an account pursuant to this article. Parent means the biological parent, legal guardian, custodian, or other person with legal authority to act on behalf of an eligible student or ESA student. Resident school district means the county school district, in which, like, all of these are pretty straightforward. We know what treasurer, curriculum, education. Well, I mean, we don't know what education service provider means, but eligible student, ESA student's pretty straightforward now that we know what an ESA is. Parent and resident school district should be pretty easy to get through. So, section 1831-3. Oh, shit. Sorry, my mic's hooked to something in the corner and I bumped it. That's my bad. This is what you do when you're poor. You gotta make things work. The amount of funds deposited into an account pursuant to this article shall be an amount equivalent to the percentage provided to the Mountaineer Challenge Academy in section 18-2-6 of this code of the dollar amount the resident school district would have received from the public school support program to educate the ESA student had the student enrolled there. This calculation shall include funds from state sources, but may not include any federal or local funds. So whatever the school would receive for having that child in said school instead gets put into this student account, is what it's saying. The amount of funds deposited shall be equivalent to the percentage provided. So all it's saying is, if your kid's not in school, for whatever makes them eligible for an ESA, it goes into the ESA instead of going to the school. In exchange for the parent's agreement pursuant to section 1831-4C, which we haven't gotten to yet, which is weird that they would reference something further. We can take a look at it. The treasurer shall create a standard form that parents can submit to establish their students' eligibility for the ESA program and shall ensure that the application is readily available and may be submitted through various sources. Okay, there we go. So, in exchange for the parents' agreement pursuant to them getting the treasurer's form that they're allowed to fill out, and then, filling it out and giving it back in, the Department of Education shall transfer from the monies that would otherwise be allocated to a recipient's prior school district, or if the child is currently eligible to attend kindergarten, the monies that the department would otherwise be allocated to a recipient's expected school district of attendance to the treasurer for deposit into a West Virginia ESA in an amount that is equivalent to the percentage provided to the Mountaineer Challenge Academy. The state superintendent of schools shall, by rule, determine how the fund transfer to the treasurer shall be accomplished. Parents of an ESA student shall agree to use the funds deposited in their student's ESA only for the following qualifying expenses to educate the student. Tuition, so this is going to help us with that little vague definition up there. But all right, so tuition and or fees at a private school, tuition and or fees for non-public online learning programs, tutoring services provided by an individual or a tutoring facility, services contracted for and provided by a public district, charter, or magnet school, including, without limitation, individual classes and extracurricular activities and programs. Textbooks, curriculum, or other instructional materials, including, without limitation, any supplemental materials or associated online instruction required by either a curriculum or an education service provider. ESP. Already did that. Stop it. I already did that too. I used to be on a different schedule, and that keeps popping up. I need to stop it. Computer hardware, or this is all what can be paid for still. Sorry, we got a little sidetracked. Computer hardware or other technological devices that are primarily used to help meet an ESA student's educational needs. Educational software applications, school uniforms, fees for nationally standardized assessments, advanced placement examinations, any examinations related to college or university admission, and tuition and or fees for preparatory courses for the aforementioned exams. Fees for summer education programs and specialized after-school education programs, but not after-school childcare, tuition, fees, instructional materials, and examination fees at a career or technical school or education provider. Educational services and therapies, including but not limited to occupational, behavioral, physical, speech language, and audiotherapy therapies. Audiological therapies, sorry. Tuition and fees at an institution of higher education as we call it. Fees for transportation paid to a fee for service transportation provider for the student to travel to and from an education service provider, or any other educational expense approved by the treasurer. That's a little weird. So just all of this stuff that we just went through, starting with tuition at a private school, all the way down to anything approved by the treasurer. So now that we're digging into the meat of this, especially this first one, this section D1 right here, it's section 18-31-3D-1. That's what we're looking at right now. This means that what this bill's proposing, and we'll see the continuation of it later, is that we're going to spend our tax dollars giving children and their parents an account that they can use at private schools. Meaning your kid, like I could be paying for your kid to go to Jesus school instead of regular school, or Muhammad school instead of regular school. So depending on what the restrictions on private schooling is in this state, which I'm assuming is pretty lax, I'm going to have to look into it. But depending on what the curriculum of private schools looks like, this is just not good. It's privatized. It's essentially using public funds to privatize the school system, which is just a bad idea. Like, it's never been a good idea to privatize the school system, but we'll get into that. You know, I could provide sources and stuff, but I'm trying not to give my opinion. I need to just stick to the text. It's hard. I'm an opinionated person. So, in my opinion, privatizing schools is bad, but we're just covering the text now. Sorry. So, after D, we have E. The funds in an ESA may only be used for educational purposes in accordance with what has been going on. ESA funds may not be refunded, rebated, or shared with a parent or ESA student in any manner. Any refund or rebate for goods or services purchased with ESA funds shall be credited directly to the student's ESA. Okay, but didn't it just say ESA funds may not be refunded or rebated in any manner? Like, in any manner is what it says. But then it says any refund or rebate goes. So which one is it? Is it prohibited, or does it just go into? That is literally contradictory wording. ESA funds may not be refunded, rebated, or shared with a parent or ESA student in any manner. They can't be refunded or rebated. But then it says any refund or rebate for goods or services purchased with ESA funds, even though it says they cannot be, is credit. All right, we're leaving it. Parents are allowed to make payments for the costs of educational goods and services not covered by the funds in their student's ESA. However, personal deposits into an ESA are not permitted. Okay, so you can't you can't put money into your own educational service account, which is really stupid, but all right. Funds deposited in an ESA do not constitute taxable income to the parent or the ESA student. That's why they're making sure it's tax exempt. So if you linked it to, like, you linked your funds to a bank account regularly, your funds would be taxed. Or if you were to receive it from an employer or whatever. But if you're like a private contractor and you get money and then you put it in an ESA, that's not taxable. So that's probably why they did that. An ESA shall remain in force, and any unused funds shall roll over from quarter to quarter and from year to year until the parent withdraws the ESA student from the ESA program or until the ESA student graduates from college with a bachelor's degree, unless the ESA is closed because of a substantial misuse of funds. However, if an ESA, that should be a semicolon. That should be a semicolon. Who wrote this? Who wrote that? That's a semicolon. Sorry, I'm nitpicking. However, if an ESA student has not enrolled in a post-secondary institution within 4 years after graduating from high school, or if an ESA student turns 26 years of age, whichever occurs first, the ESA shall be closed, and any unused funds revert to the treasurer and be allocated to fund other ESAs. Fair enough. Nothing in this article requires that an ESA student must be enrolled full or part-time in either a private school or non-public online school. Sure. So what they're saying is you can still go to public school. You don't have to not go to a public school if you have an ESA. It's just like we're just trying to. We just want to see little Walmarts that are teaching people. I'm sorry. I got to stop. I got to stop putting my 2 cents in. But that's what they're doing. They're making it to where like little Walmarts are able to educate your kid. So, application for an education saving account. All right, I don't want to read through that. This is just how you get said account. Let's see what the next one is. Responsibilities of the treasurer. Nah, I'm here for the content. I'm supposed to be reading all of it. I'll read all of it. All right. So, application for an education saving account. A parent may apply to the treasurer to establish an ESA. The treasurer shall accept and approve applications year-round and shall establish procedures for approving applications in an expeditious manner. Fair enough. The treasurer shall create a standard form. We read that one already. The treasurer shall approve an application for an ESA if, subsections, the parent submits an application for an ESA in accordance with any application procedures established by the treasurer. The student on whose behalf the parent is applying is an eligible student. Funds are available for the ESA, and the parent signs an agreement with the treasurer promising subsection A to provide education for the eligible student in at least the subjects of reading, language, mathematics, science, and social studies. Which can we go on a little tangent about how social studies isn't actually social studies? Like, it's just history. Like, that's like, we don't actually study the societies in history. We just kind of like shoot dates and shove them down people's throats, So like, can we not keep calling it social studies? Is this like a West Virginia thing? Does anybody else out there have social studies instead of just history? Like, maybe I'm wrong on that one. But we don't really study any of their societies, so calling it social studies doesn't seem right. So they have to provide language, math, science, and history. Not to enroll the ESA student full-time in a district school or an innovation in education school, the West Virginia Virtual School, or a West Virginia School for the Deaf and Blind. What? Okay. I mean, I guess those are probably just all public ones, and typically you're not going to be able to enroll a kid who's having his public funding transferred into a private account to be used at private industries also go to public school. It doesn't make any sense. But C, to use the funds in the ESA only for qualifying expenses to educate the eligible student as established by the ESA program. D, to comply with the rules and requirements of the ESA program. E, to afford the ESA student with opportunities for educational enrichment such as organized athletics, art, music, or literature. E. Oh, we're going back. Okay, so this was all D, all the way down until this lowercase e, right? So this. So they have to give them, the ability to go to school privately, make sure that they learn reading, language, arts, math, science, and history. I'm calling it history. They don't go to essentially public schools. To use them only for things that are actually fair. To comply with the rules of the ESA program, which that's what we're establishing. So that's self-evident. I don't know why that's what doesn't you don't. All right, whatever. Uh, to afford the ESA student opportunities for educational enrichment. That one's a little weird. You have to afford them athletics, art, music, and literature, which is a little weird. Because if you're giving them the option, why are there still restrictions? I thought this was supposed to be like a laissez-faire bill. Sorry, again, need to back off. The signed agreement between the parent and the treasurer shall satisfy the compulsory school attendance requirements established in this code. If the treasurer shall annually renew a student's ESA if funds are available. Upon notice to the treasurer, an ESA student may choose to stop receiving ESA fundings and enroll full-time in a public school, so they can stop at any time. Enrolling as a full-time student in a public school shall result in the immediate suspension of payment of additional funds into the student's ESA. However, the ESA shall remain open and active for the parent to make qualifying expenditures to educate the student from funds remaining in the ESA when or if no funds remain in the student's ESA, the treasurer may close the ESA. Okay. So they stop any additional funds into the ESA, but anything left over they can use, which is why it says that you're not ineligible for wherever it just said it. It was up here. It says that they're not ineligible for private school or non-public school. It says that nothing in this article requires that they must be full-time or part-time enrolled in either a private or non-public online school, which would include homeschooling, which I didn't think about there because they're not private schools or public schools, they're homeschools. So with that having been said, you would also make this no requirement, nothing prohibiting them from going to public school, so that anything that would happen here, where the ESA eventually closes because they choose to go back to school, they still have the ESA until all the funds are gone. So they're allowed to have an ESA while also going to public school, but they're not allowed to receive funds into the ESA while they're going to public school. So that's a weird little confliction that got all cleared up. So the treasurer, if eligible, we're on I. If an eligible student decides to return to the ESA program, payments into the student's existing ESA may resume if the ESA is still open and active, or a new ESA may be established if the student's ESA was closed. Fair enough. The treasurer may adopt rules and policies to provide the least disruptive process for ESA students who desire to stop receiving ESA payments and enroll in full-time public school. In addition to the treasurer's duties, because we're on to Section 5, responsibility of the treasurer, obligations and authorities stated in other parts of the article, the treasurer has the following duties and obligations. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16 of them. Okay. Gotta go through these fast. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get better at reading fast. The treasurer shall maintain the treasurer shall maintain an updated list of education service providers, ESPs, and shall ensure that the list is publicly available through various sources, including the internet. Okay. I mean, wait. Okay. So this clears up our thing earlier of fucking meth head down the street. But it means that the treasurer can approve of it, which means that, like, all right, so I'm going to pose a scenario based on this. We're going to see if it switches anything up and prevents it. But let's say, I don't know, the treasurer has a cousin who's totally out of work, uh, but he's kind of a smart guy, I guess, and the treasurer decides he wants to give him the opportunity to make some money as a uh, private science teacher or whatever. All right, the man has no degrees or anything like that, and the treasurer fucking just puts him on the list of education service providers. Right? Then that man would, like, just a weird thing that could happen. You know, there could be some weird fuckery where the treasurer is maybe even if he's like in debt and let's say he owes like a bank a shitload of money, you know, the treasurer does, and instead of like embezzling the funds, which will get him put in prison, instead he just makes a subsidiary of that bank an education service provider to pay off his debt. Like that's a real issue in my opinion. Um, The treasurer shall provide parents with a written explanation of allowable uses of ESA funds, the responsibilities of parents and the duties of the treasurer, and the role of any private financial management firms or any other private organizations that the treasurer may contact with to administer the ESA program or any aspects of the ESA program. So that opens the door to him using private organizations to keep track of ESAs. Again, I don't particularly like that. The treasurer shall ensure that parents of students with a disability receive notice that participation in the ESA program is a parental placement under this of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. IDEA. That's nice. Along with an explanation of the rights the parentally placed students possess under IDEA and any applicable state laws and regulations. The treasurer shall contact with private organizations to administer ESA. Whoa. Shall contract? Shall contract. This includes, but is not limited to, private financial management firms to manage ESAs. What? Oh my god, I can't do it. What? Dude, I know I'm trying not to get my politics involved, but why? Like, again, this is just he could say I don't know, I'm gonna make it to where Walmart has control of the how we administer everything. The treasurer shall contract, not may, not even may. It is shall. He must. He or she must contract. They have to do a contract with private organizations. It's right there. The treasurer shall contract with private organizations to administer the ESA programs. Includes, but is not limited to, private financial management firms to manage the ESAs. He could pick any private firm he wants to manage the education system. What? What? I'm sorry, but that's just fucking stupid. This is ridiculous. This is, wow, dude. I'm keeping on that. I gotta put that somewhere. I'm just going to type it in here and leave it there. That is disgusting. Oh my God. The treasurer may deduct an amount from education savings account to cover costs of administering the ESA. What? Up to a maximum of 5% annually in the first 2 years of the program and up to a maximum of 3% annually thereafter. What? Oh, come on. Oh, fuck, dude. Do you... Is that not an issue? What is this? What is this? So, if you don't understand, the public funds that are being put forward, right? Public funds, your and my taxpayer dollars that are being put forth for education, for educating our children, right? That can not only be forced to be spent by this legislation, forced to be spent on private industries, meaning the money that you pay the government is now going to a company you have no control over. The treasurer may also deduct an amount from their savings account to cover costs of administering them. So instead of the costs being just transferred over, it's actually going to cost you more money for the same product. Essentially, like if we're talking market here, right? Let's be fair. Let's talk markets. If let's say, I don't know, let's pick a number, $10,000 a year. Let's say something obnoxious like that. Let's say each kid gets $10,000 a year to pay for their education on average, okay, including like teachers' expenses and all that stuff. $10,000 is what it will cost. $10,000 in a year is what goes into the ESA, right? Because they're just readjusting it. They're putting it somewhere else, right? So if $10,000 would regularly just go directly to the school to pay for the education, the facilities, all that, right? Instead, you get $10,000 to pay for private schooling or homeschooling or whatever it is you want, right? But they can also deduct up to 5% of that just because. So instead of them just sending $10,000 directly to the school system to allow your kid to be educated, they send you $9,500 and keep $500 on every single account for themselves. And this is when you see things like what the military was doing, when people like, I'm pretty sure AOC was doing it. They were asking like questions about the budget for the military because we looked into it and found they were spending like $300 on packs of pencils. And that's really easy to do if you're buddy-buddy with everyone in the system. The treasurer could just take that stuff and go out to dinner and say that it was a business expense, essentially. It was part of the education. The educational... the ESA program. That's how we'll put it. The Education Savings Account Program. ESA program. Like, it's just bad. You just lose money. You go from getting $10,000 for your kid to $9,500 for your kid. That's what you do. That's it. It's literally a $500 deduction for you to take them to a school that's almost guaranteed to be objectively worse, because it also will cost more than $10,000 to send them to that school. So, like, what... Why not just make public schools better? Why is that so hard? Why is that so hard? All right. So, they may take money and put it in their own fucking bank account. The treasurer can. The treasurer shall implement or contract. So this is, again, shall implement or contract with a private organization to implement a commercially viable, cost-effective, and parent-friendly system for payment for services from ESAs to education service providers by electronic or online funds or transfer. So more of the same. They have to go outside. They can't just do it with government funds, with the funds we're giving them already, so that then we can then beg for them to give it back to us, so that we can then spend it on a fucking private industry that's not going to teach our kids right. That's fuck, dude. This bill is garbage. The treasurer shall not adopt a system that relies exclusively on requiring parents to be reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenses, but rather... Oh, sorry, I skipped over this, didn't I? No, that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6A. Okay. The treasurer shall not adopt a system that relies exclusively on requiring parents to be reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenses, but rather shall provide maximum flexibility to parents by facilitating direct payments to education service providers, as well as requests for pre-approval of and reimbursements for qualifying expenses, including expenses pursuant to this section of this code. So, like, just garbage. Just garbage. What is happening? No. All right, we're good. Sorry. My again, poor person is coming out. My poor person's coming out right now. All right. The treasurer shall also seek to implement... Is this right? No. Okay. We got to go here. The treasurer may contract with private institutions to develop the payment system. So this is may. So why isn't it may? Why isn't it may everywhere? Why is it shall? That is as distinct as possible. The treasurer shall also seek to implement a commercially viable, cost-effective, and parent-friendly system for public rating, reviewing, and sharing information about education service providers, ideally as a part of the same system that facilitates the electronic or online funds transfers, so as to create a one-stop shop for parents and ESA students. A one-stop shop for education, baby! To where all you have to do is work together as a community to make sure that your education system's real good, and you don't have to go anywhere else. You just go to the one place. You send your kid to the one place. Everyone likes it, and it's funded by public funds, funded by taxes given to people to spend on. That's just fucking public schools. It's just public schools. What you're doing is just public schooling, but somebody else gets to make money on it. What are you doing? All right, sorry. This bill is so stupid, and it's already passed the House. This is why we need people that aren't worthless on the House. I need to see who did this. I need to see who voted on this. I'm looking into it. I'm writing their names down. If anyone in my district is going, I'm writing them down. I'm writing it down. This is disgusting. All right. So we were on the responsibilities of the treasurer, commercially viable, one-stop shop, just public schools if they were instead private for whatever reason. If an education service provider requires partial payment of tuition or fees prior to the start of the academic year to reserve space for an ESA student admitted to the education service provider, such partial payment may be paid by the treasurer prior to the start of the school year in which the ESA is awarded, and deducted in an equitable manner from subsequent ESA deposits to ensure adequate funds remain available throughout the school year. But if an ESA student decides not to use the education service provider, the partial reservation payment must be returned to the treasurer by such education service provider and credited to the student's ESA. Like, this is just bogging us down in more bureaucratic nonsense. Instead of just paying your taxes, and then your taxes go to the school system, and then you get to vote on, school superintendent and stuff. Instead of that happening and democratically electing people that you want your community in charge of the education system, instead, what we're going to do is, basically just bury it in bureaucracy. I thought, like, the conservative privatized mindset was to trim the fat and make things smaller. This is not doing that. This is just making it worse. They just they just want your life to be worse for no reason. I don't get it. The treasurer shall continue making deposits into a student's ESA until the treasurer determines that the ESA student is no longer eligible. The treasurer determines that there was a substantial misuse of the funds, which just means, like, you could wrap it up with just the treasurer determines that the ESA student is no longer an eligible student. Because if there was misuse of the funds, that makes you ineligible to, as a student. You're not able to do it. You're ineligible now. All right, ignoring the catch-alls. C, the parent or ESA student withdraws, which would make them ineligible. The ESA student enrolls full-time in a public school, which would make you ineligible. The ESA student graduates from high school. Ineligible. Wait. Didn't they say higher education earlier, such as college tuition? So if the ESA student graduates from high school, is something that stops them from getting funds put into their ESA? Does that just means that they can pay for a really shitty high school experience so that they can get a really shitty college experience for less money? Like, all right, letting it go. The treasurer shall have the authority to conduct or contract for the auditing of individual ESAs and shall, at minimum, conduct random audits of ESAs on an annual basis. So this just means the treasurer has more work to do, which doesn't seem like something we should be trying to do to our officials. Like, instead, we should just try and handle things ourselves, pretty straightforward. But now not only does he have to make sure that he's allocating funds properly for each school district, but now he also, I'm using he, but he or she, the treasurer, also has, they have to ensure that all of the ESAs are not only being funded correctly, but then they have to go through and audit all of them. Not all of them, auditing them randomly, which probably also means the IRS style of, we don't audit poor people, or we don't audit rich people because it's really, really hard. We only audit poor people, which is likely what it's going to be, which is, I guess, to be expected. The treasurer shall have the authority to make any parent or ESA student ineligible for the ESA program in the event of intentional or substantial misuse of ESA. What? We've already established that. This is just fluff. Like, I just want to beat my head off of something. The treasurer shall create procedures to ensure that a fair process exists to determine whether intentional or substantial misuse has occurred. The treasurer shall have the authority to refer suspected cases of intentional and substantial misuse of ESA funds to the Attorney General for investigation. A parent or ESA student may appeal the treasurer's decision to make a parent or student ineligible. The treasurer may bar an education service provider from accepting payments from ESAs if the treasurer determines that the education service provider has intentionally or substantially misrepresented information or failed to refund any overpayments in a timely manner. Routinely failed to provide students with promised educational goods or services. That's it. Those are the only two. The treasurer shall create procedures to ensure that a fair process exists to determine whether an education service provider may be barred from receiving payments. If the treasurer bars an education service provider from receiving payments, it shall notify parents and ESA students of its decision as quickly as possible. All right. Education service providers may appeal treasurer's decision to bar them from receiving payments. Right. The treasurer may accept gifts and grants from any source to cover administrative costs. To inform the public about ESA program or to fund additional ESAs. What? What? The treasurer may accept grits. I can't even talk. The, the treasurer may accept gifts and grants from any source to cover administrative costs. What? Okay. All right. I can't. It's perfectly it is perfectly legal for him to validate like this is how things become monopolized. They're begging for school choice. They want school choice. We're tired of Come on, man. We're tired of going to public schools only. We want school choice. That's how it works. Market forces are what determine whether something's good or not. But then they put shit like this in there, which essentially allows monopolies to exist. So that now we're just moving our kids from one school system, a one school system is what we'll say, to a one school system. But this time they have no democratic control over said school system. They just have to deal with it. Because as long as the treasurer accepts gifts and grants from any source, including education service providers, the people he has to certify as legitimate. Oh well, what if he only certifies the people that give him grants for administrative costs? That's a fucking monopoly. It's gross, dude. This is gross. The treasurer may adopt rules and policies that are not inconsistent with this article that are necessary for the administration of this article, including establishing or contracting for the establishment of an online anonymous fraud reporting service. Fair enough. Establishing anonymous telephone hotline. Policies that require a surety bond. A surety? I mean, it's just a sureness bond for education service providers receiving more than $100,000 in ESA. So let's look up how surety bonds work. Boom. A surety bond is a promise to be liable for the debt, default, or failure of another. It is a three-party contract which one party, the surety, guarantees performance or obligations of a second party. So it's like having a cosigner on a loan. If you default on the loan, they pay it, which is why you can get bigger loans if you have a cosigner, because they can guarantee payment on it. Procedures for refunding payments of education service providers back to ESAs. Okay. Procedures for entering into reciprocal agreements with other state ESA agencies or entities, whether public or private, to recognize and allow education service providers approved in other states to receive payments from ESAs under this article. To recognize and allow education service providers approved in other states to receive. Do you see this? Again, right here, this. You know how people talk about how all the manufacturing jobs are gone? They're going to China, they're going to India, they're going to, Venezuela or whatever, right? Pick a country that isn't America, and people will say our manufacturing jobs are going there. This is literally the same thing with teaching jobs, right? So they're saying that you're allowed to spend your West Virginia paid for ESA on an Ohio private school, meaning any private school in another state, as long as it's approved by the treasurer. But Ohio or Pennsylvania are the closest ones to us right now. I mean, deep down in the state, you could go to Kentucky or North Carolina even if you want to, if you're close enough down that way. Like, what are we to do about that? That's literally just sending our jobs out of state. That's just sending jobs out of state. That's all it is. That's what this just did. Any rules or policies adopted by the treasurer should avoid excessive bureaucracy. What, this whole thing is excessive. And overly prescriptive mandates, and instead focus on easing parental involvement and encouraging education service providers to provide parents with ESA students with a broad array of education options. So this is the issue I have with this whole thing so far, is that the private industries have no right to public funding at all. The public shouldn't, like, if we're going full laissez-faire capitalism, we're talking libertarian here. The taxes don't come into it at all. At all. You should not have an ESA. It is absolutely fundamentally against their philosophy to have an ESA even exist. It's tough, all right? These people that are proposing these bills are ideologically inconsistent. They can't justify to themselves any of this. It doesn't fit. But they can make money on it. It's the only thing. They can make money on it. It's gross. I would much rather just have well-educated children that are able to grow up and think for themselves and think critically. But all right, fair enough. Parent Review Committee. There is created by the Parent Review Committee to assist the treasurer. There is created the Parent Review. There is created the Parent Review Committee. That's really weird. You wouldn't, like, that's the legislative way of saying it. There is created. Okay. The Parent Review Committee to assist the treasurer in determining whether questionable expenditures meet the requirements to be considered qualifying expenditures to educate the ESA student pursuant of this code and provide recommendations to the treasurer about how to implement, administer, and improve the ESA program. So, again, more bureaucracy. B, the Parent Review Committee, A, consists of seven members who are parents of ESA students and represent no fewer than 4 counties in the state. Okay. Shall be appointed by the state treasurer and serve at the state treasurer's pleasure for one... That's a weird way of putting it. For 1 calendar year and may be reappointed. And the state treasurer or the director's designee... The director? Who is the director? Maybe I'm missing this. All right. The state treasurer or the director, maybe treasurer's designee, director's designee, serves as the non-voting chair of the commission, or the committee. I mean, same thing. The treasurer may request the committee to meet in person or virtually to determine whether an expenditure of ESA funds is or was a qualifying expense. The committee may deny or approve questionable expenditures by majority vote. So there's 7 of them, so 4 of them have to vote. The treasurer may also request the committee to meet in person or virtually to review appeals of education service provider denials pursuant to this section of the code, and to provide recommendation to the treasurer as to whether an ESP should be allowed to receive or continue receiving payments from ESAs. So that means there's going to be 7 parents, only 7 parents with connections to the treasurer, who get to decide whether or not somebody gets to be treated properly in the system, like whether or not an expense is considered valid. So, All right, requirements for and rights of education service providers. To be eligible to accept payments from an ESA, an education service provider shall 1. Submit notice to the treasurer that they wish to participate in the program. 2. Provide parents with a receipt for all qualifying educational expenses. 3. Agree to not refund, rebate, or share ESA funds with parents or ESA students in any manner except that the funds may be remitted or refunded to an ESA in accordance with procedures established by the treasurer. Okay. Certify that it will not discriminate based on race, color, ethnicity, or national origin. Agree to submit any employee who will have contact with ESA students to a criminal background check. This article does not limit the independence or autonomy of an education service provider or make the actions of an ESP the actions of the state government. Dude, this is literally like, this is some Randroid shit. This is wild. Education service providers shall be given maximum freedom. Sorry. To provide for the educational needs of ESA students without government control. Evil government. Mean, evil, bad government. Listen, I'm not a statist. I don't like the state too much. But, like, the people that talk about government control are inherently snowflake pussies that can't live life. Like, if you're not a fan of government control, stay the fuck off the road. That was built by the government. All right? Like, stay the fuck off of it. Got it? Don't use your fucking cell phone. That was made from technology that was publicly funded. Like, you shouldn't have any of this. All right? Fuck off. Sorry, I'm getting real salty right now. This article does not expand the regulatory authority of the state, its officers, or any school district to impose any additional regulation of education service providers beyond those necessary to enforce the requirements of the program. Nice. Laissez-faire education. Who's a fan of that? The resident school district shall provide an education service provider that has enrolled in an ESA student with a complete copy of the student's school records while complying with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. Legal proceedings. In any legal proceeding challenging the application of this chapter to a participating entity, the state bears the burden of establishing that the challenged action, rule, or requirement is necessary and does not impose any undue burden on education service providers. Okay. And instead, I guess it just puts it on the treasurer. No liability arises on the part of the treasurer or state or of any county school district based on the award or use of an ESA awarded pursuant to this article. What? What? No liability? They're just fucking free of it? They just don't... If they fuck up, they just don't... Like, it's... You're not able to get them for, like, criminal fucking actions if they... Okay. I mean, that needs removed. Like, no matter what. Like, if this bill's gonna go through, this one specifically definitely needs removed. The treasurer should absolutely, or the state should absolutely be held liable if they fuck this up. It's really straightforward. If any part of this article is challenged in a state court as violating either the state or federal constitutions, parents of eligible and or ESA students are permitted to intervene in the lawsuit for the purposes of defending the article's constitutionality. However, for the purposes of judicial administration, a court may limit the number of parents permitted to intervene or require that all parents file a joint brief so long as they are not required to join any brief filed on behalf of any named state defendant. So this means that they likely know that this bill is fucking unconstitutional. And they're like, if you guys don't like it, we don't like it either, we'll fight you. Like, what? What is this? What is this? If any provision of this article or the application thereof to any person or circumstances is held invalid, the invalidity does not affect other provisions or applications of the article, which can be given effect without the invalid provision or application, and to this end the provisions of this article are and to this end the provisions of this article are declared to be severable. Let's read that again. If any provision of this article or the application thereof to any person or circumstances is held invalid, the invalidity does not affect other provisions or applications of the article, which can be given effect without the invalid provision or application, and to this end the provisions of the article are decided to be severable. Okay, I guess. The purpose of this bill is to create an educational savings account program for students. Strike throughs indicate language that is. No, this is new. This is new fucking legislation. The whole thing is underlined. So, this is trash, absolute garbage. These motherfuckers need to be voted out. All of these people are worthless humans that need to be voted out. If you think this is good for anyone, you're a fucking idiot, alright? Like, maybe next time, because I have to get off here soon because unfortunately I have a real job. I can't just stream all day. That'd be fucking excellent. But anyway, maybe next time we'll go through and we'll show what's wrong with the idea of legislating charter schools in like this, because it's really stupid. And it only, like I said, it only builds bureaucracy. Because now, in addition to public schooling, which the public option, I guess, we've got a public option. In addition to having a West Virginia public option now, instead of it being just the public school system, we also have to regulate the private school system. So now the treasurer has to make sure that the funds get allocated correctly both to the public schools and to the private accounts. But don't forget, he's going to contract outward to whatever company he wants. Maybe it's his wife's company. Maybe it's his company. Hey, who knows? Maybe the treasurer, before he was the treasurer, had like a monetary management company. And he's going to go to them because he thinks that his company's just super good at what they do. And that the free market has decided that his company is great. So now, believing in free markets, he's going to use public funding taken from us hardworking folk, and give it to himself. And it's legal, and they're making it legal. Wow! Yeah! No, these people are fucking stupid. Whoever came up with this needs to stop. This is garbage. I need to see who voted on this in the House. All right. We gotta go back, and I gotta see if it says who voted. Introduced to House. Sponsor, same as pending committee, passed one chamber. So this is how you can search. Yeah, these people should not be. These are none of the people I'm going to be running against when I decide to run. So I can't really ream the people that I'm going to be running against on this. But I'm gonna have to see who voted.